welcome to our webinar series on commercialisation in the public sector. I'm Jonathon Noble, I'm the Managing Director of Acumen, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here this afternoon and to be your host for this webinar series. This is the first in a series of 3 sessions that we have coming up over the next 3 weeks, and I know a number of you have joined onto multiple sessions, so we really do hope that you have a good enough time here today, that you find it useful enough, insightful enough, and practical enough that you'll join us for subsequent sessions. We've got a range of really fantastic speakers and presenters lined up over the course of the 3 weeks, and I'm enormously grateful to all of those people for giving up their time to be part of the session with us today and in the coming weeks. So today I'm joined by Tim Atkins, who is the Managing Director of Place and Growth at Cheltenham Borough Council, and his colleagues Paul Jones, who's Executive Director of Finance and Assets. They're joined by Reid, who is the Innovation Lead at Cyber Central UK, which is one of the Council's main innovation partners. And in the second half of today's session, the team from Cheltenham are going to be talking to us about their Golden Valley development and how they've used their council's commercial strategy as a means to drive economic growth and regeneration in the region and to create Cheltenham as a hub and a destination for a cyber economy in the UK. Next week on the 13th of October, Tuesday the 13th at 3 p.m, I'm joined by Amardeep Gill and Louis Sebastian from Trowers and Hamlins. Trowers is an international law firm that many of you will be familiar with. I'm sure some of you have worked with them in your organisations. And Amardeep and Louis are going to be talking to us about commercialism 2.0. So what, based on their experience, they think commercialism in the public sector might look like in the future. And they will be followed by Andrew Grant, who is Interim Chief Executive of Cambridge City Council. So many of you will know Andrew from his previous role as Chief Executive of Aylesbury Vale District Council, a council that was always leading in terms of the commercial agenda, use of technology to drive forward innovation and service improvement. Andrew has recently taken up a new role as Interim Chief Exec at Cambridge City, and we're really looking forward to hearing about how he's going to take his considerable experience to Cambridge to help them drive forward their priorities. Now, our third session is the week after that, on Tuesday the 20th of October, but at a slightly later time of 4 p.m, and that is our panel discussion. And our panel discussion features 4 leaders from across the public sector, 3 political leaders, and a leader of a slightly different kind. So our panel for that session will be Gavin Callaghan from Basildon Council, Callum Cook from South Kesteven, Dina Romero from Bath and North East Somerset. Those are our 3 council leaders, and Abdul Kara, who is an executive leader at the National Audit Office, who will be sharing his perspective from a national view with us. And that panel will be discussing, debating the topic, how commercial should the public sector be, which is a fairly pivotal question given the series of webinars that we're running. Listen, thank you so much to all of you for attending. We've got 150 people or so signed up today, which I think is a testament to how important this topic is, how engaged people are in it, and the importance of the issues to be discussed. I'd love to start off by exploring why this is such an important agenda and our interpretation of it based on our work with clients, including some of you from across the public sector. So a little bit about us before we get started. CEng is a Financial Times top-ranked management consultancy. We were really proud to be voted by Financial Times, or assessed by Financial Times, as one of the leading management consultancies in the UK in 2020. A quick plug, next year's awards are now open. So if you are an organisation that's worked with us, if you're a client of ours and you think we deserve it, we would really appreciate your nomination for the 2021 awards. We've worked with all tiers of local government, that's district councils, county councils, unitary authorities and London boroughs, and with a number of NHS trusts. Hundreds of public sector professionals have now attended one of our training courses, our workshops or our events. We do a number of things, and you can find out more about some of the things that we do on our website, but we are specialists in commercial skills and culture. And one of the things that we are passionate about is creating a community of commercially minded professionals who are interested in this agenda. We do that through training, we do that through social media, and we do that through events like this one. So what is commercial and why does it matter? Why have so many people given up their time this afternoon to talk about it? Well, if we're following the Simon Sinek philosophy, then we should start with why. So let's start off by exploring why this is an important issue, why we should be talking about it. And I mentioned that there are a number of ways to engage with the presentations and the content today. And one of them is via our polling system. So we're going to use that system to run a quick quiz to get us started. That polling option should have popped up on your screen now. And the first question that we'd like people to respond to: what percentage of organizations globally say that commercial awareness is needed to achieve main business outcomes? Is it A, 98%, B, 89%, C, 51%, or 11%? So the polling window should be available to you now. Once you've selected what you think is the right answer, click submit, and that data will come through to us. So that question again: what percentage of organizations globally say that commercial awareness is needed to achieve main business outcomes? 98%, 89%, 51%, or 11%? Most of you clearly follow this agenda very closely. The majority of people were right. It's 89%, and that's according to a survey that was done by the Financial Times. That was across all sectors, so not just the public sector. That was private sector, public sector organizations, and voluntary sector. Next question. So based on that, 89% of organizations say that commercial awareness is key to achieving their overall objectives. So with that in mind, what percentage of public sector leaders believe that they have the commercial skills that they need in their organizations? Is it A, 4%, B, 25%, C, 60%, or D, 78%? The answer is 4%. That's according to a survey that was done by CIPFA and Civica. Now, that survey was done in 2016. I should say that out of accuracy. So it's a slightly older survey. We might have expected that position to have moved on, but it's a pretty low baseline. So even if it's moved on, we might expect to see that in double digits now, but maybe only just. So that illustrates the importance of commercialism, commercial awareness, commercial skills to organizations achieving their objectives, and perhaps the gap that is still to be addressed in between the capabilities that organizations say they need and what they think they currently have. But what are we talking about exactly when we talk about commercialization, commercialism, and how does that pertain to the public sector? Well, we've worked with a number of organizations on this, and we've studied a great many more organizations than that, and these are just some of the extracts that you will find in public sector commercial strategies, most of which have been published. So this comes from a range of different organizations: local government, central government, and NHS. And you can see a huge range of topics that organizations have identified as part of their commercial strategy. So for some, it's about property investment and making best use of their assets. For others, it's about using commercial acumen to deliver greater social value. Contract management and using commercial skills to better manage third-party spend and third-party suppliers is a key feature for some organizations. Others are thinking about income generation and growing turnover, and others still talk about creating a more commercial culture and the associated skills, experience, and mindset to help the organization deliver its objectives. So you can see that there is a wide variety of definitions there of what it means to be commercial in the public sector. And those examples that we picked out, which are all from real documents, are just a small handful of the possible samples that you could get from across the sector. So we've spent a lot of time trying to work out how to reconcile all of these different definitions, different interpretations, different examples of good practice that people have. And we like to sum it up in the following way. What's the recipe for commercial success? Or to put it another way, how do you make the perfect commercial sandwich? So what on earth am I talking about, the commercial sandwich? Well, it's a little bit of a gimmick, but the reason that we describe it that way is as follows. There are different layers to an organization's commercial maturity, and we've identified a number of common themes that run through the commercial aspirations and the commercial strategies of organizations that we worked with and wider organizations across the sector. So the first layer of our commercial sandwich is strategy and alignment. We used to call this theme strategy and governance is still a key feature. I'm not underplaying the importance of that. It needs to be thought about very carefully when embarking on any kind of commercial activity. But more recently, we've started to describe it as strategy and alignment. So it's vital that any commercial activities are fundamentally aligned to an overall organizational strategy. If not, the risk is that commercial becomes just another add-on, just another thing that people are being asked to do on top of very busy day jobs. And let's face it, in the last 6 months, what constitutes a day job for a lot of people has changed quite dramatically. So if it's not clear to staff and maybe even to customers why you are doing it, it will quickly slip down the list of priorities. There was a report published last year by the LJ called Profit with a Purpose, and that talks about the link between the social value that public sector organizations are charged with creating and commercial activity. If you haven't read that, I strongly recommend having a look at that report. It's got a number of really good examples in it, and it attempts to resolve that dilemma about how commercial a public sector organization should be and how a commercial approach can underpin your organizational priorities to improve quality of services and create social value for communities. This is, by the way, the only sandwich in the world that I'm aware of that you build from the top down. So that's the top layer that we've done first, but I wouldn't recommend trying to build a sandwich from the top down in real life. Just to continue with the food metaphor for a second, I will stop this before too much longer, I promise. We know that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So the foundation of our sandwich is organizational culture. That's about creating a way of working that supports commercial activities, communicating clearly to the organization about why we're doing this and what people are allowed to do, and outlining a position that everyone can engage with and relate to their daily work. Identifying what type of commercial culture is right for your organization is absolutely crucial. And I say that because there is more than one commercial culture that you might want to work towards. And we'll look at some examples of what those might be a little bit later on. So the filling in our sandwich is made up of a number of key technical skills and capabilities that an organization needs to deliver its commercial ambitions. These can vary from organization to organization, depending on what exactly your priorities are, but our experience of working with clients has identified 3 key areas. So the first, which you should be able to see there, is supply. That includes commissioning, procurement, and contract management, which we might say the holy trinity of supply management. So in central government, the usual application of the word commercial will tend to mean focusing on maximising value from third-party contracts. Often in district councils and NHS organisations, commercial is more slanted towards income generation, and in county councils, unitary authorities and London boroughs, it can mean either or both of those things. But putting the terminology to one side for a second, I don't think there's any doubt that getting value for money from third-party contracts is a priority for the public sector, and there are some key commercial skills that can help with that. The other side of the coin, of course, to supply is demand. And this is another theme that we've changed the name of over time. We used to call this income generation, but we've updated it. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is to emphasize that this is part of an end-to-end process with supply, so thinking about both supply management and demand. But the other reason is that many organizations will be thinking about striking the right balance between generating demand and managing demand. So there will be some areas where the focus is to drive that demand up, for instance, in order to generate income, and other areas where the focus is on driving down high cost, non-value adding demand. And that kind of cost conscious thinking is also a key feature of a commercial approach. So finally, last but certainly no means least, market insight is in the middle of our sandwich because it supports both of these. So whether that's about understanding your customer base to know what they value, or having a good grasp on what's happening in the supplier markets that you depend on, understanding the markets in which you do business as either a buyer or a supplier is absolutely key. So there we have our strategic layer, which is all about aligning your commercial strategy to your overall organization's priorities. Some key technical skills and organizational capabilities. And your foundation for success is, of course, your organization's culture. So we are now going to attempt to take a whistle-stop tour of some of these themes. It will be quite quick in places because of the depth and complexity of the issues, but I wanted to try and run through all of these, at least at a high level. These will be supported by a number of examples that we're aware of, either from organizations that we've worked with directly or organizations that we're aware of across the sector. But you will certainly have thoughts and examples of your own about this, so please do share those via the chat function. So if you're aware of a particularly good example and it's worth sharing that with other people, please do make people aware of that. So we talked about our first theme being strategy and alignment, and this is so important to get right. The public sector comes under a lot of scrutiny for its commercial activities. There's a legal basis on which you can do certain things, and we'll be exploring that more next week with colleagues from Trowers and Hamlins. But there's also a moral dimension to it, and dare I say it, a political dimension. So politicians tend to become very uncomfortable when commercialism is perceived as something that puts the public sector into competition with the private sector. And if we talk about local authorities specifically for a second, that's particularly the case when that competition is with local businesses. I referenced Simon Sinek earlier, and so if you accept his premise that the most successful organizations in the world start with why, they start with their purpose and then work outwards from there, then answering that question, what is your purpose as an organization and what is the purpose behind your commercial strategy, is absolutely key before you embark on any kind of commercial activity. And so I'm really pleased that Tim and colleagues from Cheltenham are joining us for the second half of today's session. Cheltenham is an organization that has developed a commercial strategy that is firmly rooted in the geography and the economy of the borough. Their Golden Valley development isn't just a commercial project for the sake of generating income. It's a fundamental part of their vision for the borough, the place that they want to have in the UK economy and transforming the local area. The other area that often comes under scrutiny is governance. And I think there's still a tension here that the sector is still working its way through. So that the public sector has a reputation for being a bit process-driven at times, perhaps a bit bureaucratic. Now, on one hand, lots of public sector organizations are trying to change this. They're trying to become more agile, take more risks, and to be more focused on outcomes than on processes. But on the other hand, one thing we might have noticed is that whenever a significant commercial venture fails, people always point to the governance as being inadequate, and they say there was either too little control, too little scrutiny, or both. I don't have a ready-made solution to that today, unfortunately. I think it's something that we are all going to need time to work through. But if there is a key to it, it's undoubtedly in proportionality. The type of governance that you would put in place for, let's say, a trading company or a complex joint venture will need to be sufficiently robust to stand up to public scrutiny. But you don't want that same governance to stifle innovation and creativity in day-to-day working. Many of you will know that, so in some ways I'm stating the obvious, and I hope that solutions will emerge that make this easier in the future, but the point is worth making, that the governance should be proportionate to the level of risk and to what you're trying to achieve. Our second theme is about demand and about income generation. So we've got another quick quiz now via the polling system, and the question this time is, according to a 2019 survey by LGC, what percentage of councils expected their commercial income to grow? Is it A, 15%, B, 48%, C, 72%, or D, 98%? Well, the majority of people were right. The answer is C, 72%. So in that survey, 66% of councils who responded said that they expected their income to grow by between 1 and 25%, and then another 6% said they expected it to grow by between 26% and 50%. So in total, 72% expected it to grow based on 2019. That was the 2019 position, but life doesn't always work out as we might expect it to or hope it to. And it's fair to say that this year has thrown some challenges at us. So looking at the latest position, according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, how much commercial income do councils expect to lose this year, 2020-21? Is it A, 340 million, B, 860 million, C, 1.5 billion, or D, 2.8 billion? This estimate is based on what we know about the figures to date and then a forecast based on those figures for the remainder of the financial year. So it is a forecast at this point in time. But according to that work done by the IFS, what is the figure that councils overall between them expect to lose in 2020-21? 340, 860, 1.5 billion, or 2.8 billion? So that is a fairly eye-watering figure, but according to the latest work done by the IFS, that is the total amount that councils collectively are expecting to lose in income this year. So this has had a dramatic effect on a number of local authorities at an individual level. And councils that collect large amounts of income from commercial rents, parking, and trade waste, as three significant examples, have been particularly badly affected. So we're working with one organisation that's facing a £91 million funding gap by 2023. This is a local authority that has otherwise coped fairly well with the effects of 10 years of austerity, so that they've been largely reliant on income in order to address the historic savings challenges, but are now facing a really significant savings challenge over the next 2 or 3 years. And to give you a sense of proportion, that 91 million equates to about 15% of the revenue budget. Now, a cynical person might say, and some people have said this, that this illustrates the folly of being overly reliant on commercial income, and there are always critics who are ready to put forward that argument. I think that's a view that you can take with the benefit of hindsight, but I would also pose this question. After 10 years of austerity, what would the financial picture for councils look like without having had the historic benefit of that income? The fact is that many public sector organisations are so dependent on commercial income that it would be impossible to provide services without those revenues. We're currently working with an NHS organisation in Essex that generates around 300 million a year from contract income, which is the vast majority of its budget. Now, most of that comes from other public sector bodies, that's local councils, the CCGs and NHS England in the main, who commission that organisation to provide services. But it does still have to bid for the majority of those contracts on a competitive basis. And that's not just local competition. There's been increasing competition in the area from other trusts out of county moving in when large contracts are advertised, and also from private sector organisations, which includes the likes of national players like Virgin. Now, this is supposed to be changing as we move towards integrated care systems, but that is a very slowly evolving picture, and it's not something that will happen overnight. So it's important to bear in mind that certain systems are already set up to drive certain commercial behaviours. Meanwhile, while some organisations are re-evaluating their commercial positions, others are launching new strategies and pressing ahead. So Stevenage Borough Council has just approved a new commercial strategy for the organisation. I believe we have some colleagues from Stevenage on the call today, so I'd love to hear from them after the presentation. The council has adopted a broad definition of commercial. So income generation is a part of the picture, but it's not everything. The strategy also covers understanding the whole life cost of decisions, maximising value from third-party contracts, looking at different options for service delivery, and using insight and technology to modernise services. So that leads us to talk about insight, which we identified as one of the central themes in our model earlier. It's absolutely critical to commercial success. I've always resisted the urge to try and sum up commercial in a single phrase, which is why we have a whole model and a whole presentation to explain our approach. It is complex, it's not a single thing, But if somebody insisted that I sum it up in a few words, I would probably say something like this. It's about making decisions with a thorough understanding of the markets in which you do business. And that's true whether we're looking for new markets to sell services into or developing our understanding of supply markets to inform decisions about commissioning and procuring services. The importance of that second point about having really good market intelligence, insight into key marketplaces, and an understanding of what's happening with our suppliers can't be overstated. So government commercial function estimates that around 200 billion is spent annually by the public sector with third-party suppliers. That's the figure for goods and services. So if you include works and major infrastructure projects in that, the figure is of course much, much higher. So it's not that surprising that a lot of work has been done by the Cabinet Office on Commercial Skills and the public sector to try and assist with this. There's an updated version of the outsourcing playbook that was launched earlier this year. This document has been comprehensively updated. So if you looked at the previous one, the new version has got a whole load of new material in it. And if you didn't look at the previous version, there's a new updated version out there, which has got guidance on a whole range of topics. It doesn't just cover outsourcing despite the title. So there's fairly comprehensive guidance there on different delivery models, should cost modeling, and also new guidance on considerations for insourcing, which is something that many organizations are now doing or considering. So whichever technical aspects of commercialization an organization is most interested in, whether that's effective procurement and contract management, income generation, property investment, by far the most consistent theme that we find is the importance of culture. This has been a top priority for every single organization that we have ever worked with or looked at, and I have yet to come across a commercial strategy that doesn't at least mention the importance of skills, culture, and mindset. Wealdon District Council is just one great example of an organisation that we've worked with that has a focus on culture as part of its commercialisation strategy. And I'm sure that this will be something that's important to you and your organisations. It's perhaps not that surprising that culture is so high on the agenda when 40% of public sector leaders believe that commercialism is held back by restrictive organisational culture. That's according to a survey by CIPFA. And I guess the only thing that I find surprising about that is that the figure is as low as 40%. I might have expected it to be higher than that. It's possible this has something to do with the wording of the question or the survey methodology, but fortunately, we've got about 100 public sector leaders on this call to put the same question to. So the poll will be popping up any time now. And I would love to know what people think. Do you believe that commercialism in your organisation is held back by organisational culture? 84% of people on the call today said yes, commercialism is held back by the organisational culture. So when I do an updated version of this presentation, next time we do a session like this, I'm going to get rid of the 40% and I'm going to use the very scientific results of the survey that we've just conducted and say that 84% of public sector leaders believe that commercialism is held back by a restrictive culture. But what exactly do we mean by commercial culture? So I mentioned earlier that there's more than one choice of what a commercial culture would be. Now, the words that normally come up when we talk to people about this are things like entrepreneurial, agile, innovation, risk-taking, startup mentality. But the truth is that commercial organizations are at least as diverse as the public sector, and probably even more so. Just as there's no one ideal organizational culture, there's no such thing as a single commercial culture. So I want to illustrate that quickly with a really simple example here. We've identified 2 tokens of organizational culture, just 2. So the first token is about organizational control. Is this the type of organization that centralizes control and keeps decision-making reserved to a small number of people? Or is it an organization that devolves control and distributes decision-making to a lower level? The second token is risk. Are you an organization that manages risk quite carefully or an organization that takes risk? So just 2 variables in culture, and you can imagine how many variables there might be, and that will produce different results. Big banks, in particular mortgage lenders, have taken some big risks in the past, and this has had some fairly disastrous consequences. The post-2008 culture in banking, however, is much more compliance driven, and risk appetite has fallen even more this year, with the number of small deposit mortgages being granted during lockdown halving compared to a previous date in the year. Most people probably think of a company like Amazon as being an entrepreneurial organization, but its operations are highly centralized and tightly controlled. The whole business model relies on tightly managed, technology-led processes that are geared towards maintaining consistency, eliminating variability, managing risk, and reducing failure demand. Now, if you contrast that with a company like Timson's, which you might otherwise think of as being a fairly traditional family-run business, and in many ways it is, but Timson's employs a model called upside-down management, which devolves decision-making down to individual stores on things like setting prices, handling customer complaints, and paying out compensation. Netflix also devolves a huge amount of decision-making down to individual employees. Its expenses policy is famously just 5 words long: act in Netflix's best interests, and employees are given broad discretion to interpret that as they see fit. But it also has a ruthless performance culture, and getting that judgment wrong can have severe consequences. Other organizations that devolve decision-making down include Virgin and Aldi, but these organizations are less conservative than a brand like Timson's on issues like marketing or the aggressiveness of their growth strategies. Finally, commercial organizations that take risks but centralize that risk taking and control. A couple of examples there. These are organizations that are controlled by a very small number of executives at the top of the organizations who make all of the meaningful decisions. In the case of WeWork, one former employee has described the organization as being like a cult. And the thing about cults, of course, is that they're usually controlled by one often very charismatic leader at the top of the organization. Those are just 4 different types of organizational culture that you could end up with based on using just 2 cultural variables. And we've placed different types of commercial organizations in very different spaces on that cultural matrix. So I encourage people, when they talk about adopting a more commercial culture, to consider what that means and what's going to be right for them. So I'm not doing as well as I would have hoped for time, and I want to allow time for questions, and then also to give Tim, Reid and colleagues enough time to go through their presentation. So to wrap up very quickly, these are the common themes and some top tips that we've discovered based on our work with organizations across the public sector. We will make these slides available to everybody after the session, so don't worry if you don't get an opportunity to read everything that's on them now. A lot of the good practice that we've identified, we have captured in our commercial maturity model. This covers all of the themes that we've talked about today, and it sets out a roadmap for organizations who want to develop their commercial capabilities. We'll also make this available to everyone after the session. If you have found some of the things that we've covered today at breakneck speed interesting and would like to explore these themes in more detail with the luxury of a bit more time, we have dates for a number of our Commercial Academy training courses and workshops coming up. So we have one more date available this year. That's on the 8th of December for our Establishing Commercial Acumen course. And that covers all of the themes that we've been through today, but with the leisure of a little bit more time. We've also got some technical courses on business cases, contract management and market insight. And on the 23rd of February next year, we've just launched a new session, which is a collaborative workshop on commercial recovery. So that would be an ideal session for organizations who are thinking about what the future of income generation is for their organization in a, I must stop using the phrase post-pandemic world, but it's so heavily ingrained in the language, in a world that is learning to cope with pandemics. So there'll be an opportunity there to talk to other colleagues who are thinking about these issues, debate what percentage of the budget you can reasonably expect to be made up of commercial income in the future, and look for opportunities to create some new sources of income from non-traditional markets that perhaps haven't been quite so severely affected. So I do hope some of you will consider joining us at those sessions. And I look forward to taking any questions. So one of our questions is, given that there is an 85% recognition for greater commercialism and an acknowledgement of the skills gap, which was our survey, why is there such a resistance to hiring individuals with significant private sector commercial knowledge and experience? The NHS springs to mind, but is this also an issue for local government? Good question. I think part of it is about organisational culture. So I guess, having been a local government commercial director, I've been through that process of thinking that we want to bring people into the organisation who have a particular skill set and a certain approach. And often you do that if you want to set up, say, a traded services function or a new commercial team that's going to be focused on income generation. Most public sector organisations will realise that they haven't traditionally had those skills in-house, and will be looking to bring people in who've got a sales background and more experience of doing that type of thing, as one example. But as you know, we think commercial is broader than just sales. I think you almost need a cultural incubation period. So what I've observed is we bring people in from the commercial sector to the public sector to help change the way that we do things and drive forward a more commercial way of thinking. Often those people can then become frustrated because they find that their hands are tied by process and bureaucracy. And I think things aren't always given the time that they would benefit from, of having that transition period where people kind of learn what the different approaches are and find a way of working that suits both parties. That's a very, very quick high-level answer to that, but I hope you take the meaning. So we've had another question, which is, how far are most councils away from the commercial maturity model? Thanks for that, Michael. That's a loaded question if ever I've seen one. So I think, respectfully, it's the wrong way to phrase the question. One of the things that we always say to people on the commercial maturity model, there's a 5-point scale there, but not everybody has to go for level 5. It's about what's right for your organization. I think the temptation when you see these maturity models is to assume that default position is that everybody has to be at level 5, the top, best in the world, highest performing, world class. That's not the case. It's about what's right for your organization. In our model, there are different themes, and so people can identify which themes are most important to them and focus more resources and more effort on those. So you might decide it's more important for us to be as good as we can possibly be at managing our third-party suppliers. We want to be a 4 or 5 on that. At the same time, we'd like to generate some new sources of income, but it's not the be-all and end-all of our strategy. So we're going to go for level 3 on that. Level 3 in our model would be good practice. It's called practicing. You've got processes that are consistently embedded in the organization. Things work well, but you wouldn't describe it as world-class or world-beating. Final question, and I'm going to answer before I hand over to the team from Cheltenham. How do you approach the balance of consultancy intervention with building in-house capability? Great question. It's a question that comes up in almost every tender that we respond to, for one thing. So knowledge transfer is a really key part of it, and should be a key part of the offer that you get from any consultancy. We work really, really closely with all of our clients to make sure that we transfer as much skills and knowledge through osmosis as possible. So there's an element of formal training there, and I've talked about workshops and courses that we run. The majority of the knowledge handover and the skills transfer that we do comes from day-to-day working really closely with our clients. And I think not all of my colleagues in the consulting industry might agree with this, but we have a duty to do that. So if there are new things that come along where it's relevant and appropriate to bring in specialist expertise, that's a legitimate use of consultancy time. But we ought not to be bringing in consultants to do the same thing over and over again. You know, there's an onus on both sides to make sure that that knowledge is transferred and that public sector organisations get better at doing the things that they routinely need to do. Okay, so I am going to wrap up that part of the discussion there, and I am really looking forward to welcoming Tim and Reid to the presentation to talk about how they've been putting commercialism into practice at Cheltenham.
And I, Tim Atkins, are going to just give you a short presentation here just as to what we're doing with the Golden Valley and how that links in with our commercial strategy at Cheltenham, and then talking a little bit about the cyber ecosystem and its importance to, not just to Cheltenham but to the region, and how this can impact on our strategy going forward, the growth of the area, and hopefully long-term financial prosperity. So the Golden Valley. So if you firstly, where did this all come from? So this started off back in 2015. When the Chancellor, if we can remember back then, when George was at the helm, came to GCHQ and made a presentation to say that the cyber innovation, there were 2 cyber innovation centres in the UK, one in London and one in Cheltenham. And the impact of that, as we began to unpick it, was quite significant. So we then started to think about how this sat into our commercial strategy, which is very much developed to be us investing in Cheltenham for Cheltenham. And so some of the things that we've done commercially, we are a relatively small council, but the investments we've made have always been something that ticked another box. We saw the development of this cyber industry, which is almost sitting on our doorstep, as something which was really important. So that sits in our overarching place vision, but it's very much part of the corporate plan. Which this is now a priority. So as like colleagues in local government are all up against it financially at the moment, I think we are revisiting some of the priorities or some of the spending plans that we had, and looking at them to say which is the most important. And cyber for us is at the forefront of that.
And what's really exciting about this local strategy is that it's actually part of a regional and national strategy. So when we think about Gloucestershire, we've got a local industrial strategy that has a major focus on cyber technologies. There is the national cyber security strategy that has innovation and entrepreneurship as part of that, with Cheltenham being the home of cybersecurity. And then, of course, there's the international dimension, with the UK being the global leader in cybersecurity. And one of the key things for us is being part of that bigger regional piece. A number of you might have heard of the Western Gateway. So this is part of the levelling up agenda for central government. And this region actually is quite substantial. It's got a large economy, £107 billion there, and cyber is right at the heart of that. Now, the Minister for Digital Infrastructure and DCMS recognises this, and these are his words, that Cheltenham with GCHQ is the home of cybersecurity. And so they are looking at how they can invest, not just to make Cheltenham a better place, but to look at how cybersecurity can really make the UK an incredible place to invest and to grow economically. And one thing we should really just focus on, that the cyber sector is doubling in 2 years. It's now valued at £8.3 billion, and it's the fastest, or one of the fastest growing industries in the UK. And when we think about the wider government context, we've got the comprehensive spending review and the integrated review looking at defence and foreign policy, etc., etc. Looking at, you can see this on the government's website, you can see how government are looking for sectors like cyber to be part of that levelling up, to make the UK a scientific superpower, and really strengthening the place of the UK in the world, with economic resilience as well as security.
Okay, so with this as a backdrop, we started to pull together a vision of how we could enable that growth. So part of this came around through the planning process, which we describe at the moment. But in this diagram here, you can see an image of a settlement, but just below that, you can see a donut-shaped thing, which happens to be GCHQ. So our strategy started developing around a large area of land, which was directly adjacent to GCHQ, which at the time, back in 2015, 2016, we fed into our development plan process to get it taken out of the greenbelt. So that was one of the biggest steps that we did. But part of this was very much a downstream view about making somewhere really special, somewhere world-class, that was an integrated development. It just was not an urban extension. So using planning powers and submissions that maybe many of other yous have been involved in, we went forward to try and put some supplementary planning documents together to set the bar a little bit higher, so that when developers came forward, we would be creating somewhere of significance and somewhere great. However, as we went through that process, it became very clear to us that it probably needs more than planning if we really wanted to take this by the horns and really wanted to make something of it. So what do we do next? So the site which was allocated there, allocated out of the green belt is circled in red, and then there's another area which is dotted in red. All of that makes up 200 hectares, which is quite significant. You can see the motorway, the M5 boundary going across that, and obviously significant building there just to the right of that site, which is GCHQ. So the location was perfect for the creation of the Cyber Innovation Centre, and us digging under the economy to understand, well, what does this mean for us? Is there some opportunity here, and how do we want to see this brought forward? So what the council ultimately did was we developed a very strong business case to take to our council, and we invested £37.5 million in buying 45 hectares of land. And so we ended up buying 2 parcels of land, one up there in the north and one in the south, which could give us something in the region. This is approximate, around 650 homes and up to 2 million square foot of commercial space. And we're feeling if we link that back to the slides that we just seen about planning, we could create something that was very special, and hopefully something that would be a flagship that would take the delivery of the cyber sector forward. So what do you do when you've just bought 45 hectares of land and you've set your stall out? By this time we've been awarded garden community status through Homes England and the Ministry of Housing. So a lot of people are now beginning to look at us. So we decided to go out and try to get on board a JV partner or development partner to deliver the ambition. And this was at the time, as we were just going into this, it was February, March last year. So we were lined up with the DIT, who were very interested in this, so there's a Department for International Trade, to go to them for the MIPIM event in Cannes. Unfortunately, as we're all very aware, the world came to a bit of a lockdown in March, and that didn't progress. So we took a deep breath at that stage and started thinking, well, how are we going to launch this? Is this a good time to go out with a major commercial development? Everyone's going to be in crisis. So after a couple of weeks, we tested our market intelligence and the sector intelligence, particularly around cyber. And I think the view was that actually this still had legs, that the need for cyber was actually growing, not shrinking, and the need for appropriate office space to co-create innovation was particularly important. So we progressed with I'd say quite a prestigious promotional campaign. And then we went to launch, and we went to launch that in April this year, of which I must say we and my financial director are probably a little bit nervous about the way that we launched this, and we were trying to really get a lot of attention. And so not only as part of this did we put out a lot of good quality material, we also put together video.
We're deflecting something like 4,000 cyber attacks daily. We're preventing 135 million connections to malware sites a month.
BCS surveyed over 300 senior IT leaders, and the number one thing that keeps those guys awake at night is cybersecurity.
We're going into a world that we don't fully understand at the moment.
It's about keeping everybody safe, it's about keeping the lights on, the water flowing, energy, transport.
The growth in the cyber industry is huge at the moment, and it's going to continue to grow. And that gives us massive opportunity, but it's around lifestyles, it's around jobs for people, and it's around regeneration.
£8.3 billion going into the UK economy thanks to that sector, doubled in the last 2 years.
We've got massive amounts of innovation and collaboration already happening between massive global companies such as Microsoft, Google, BT, and then working with those more innovative, smaller micro companies that really are going to look for that opportunity to have a place where they can all start to innovate and collaborate.
What GCHQ provides us with is one of those magnets, one of those attractors.
Got the GCHQ site just across the road from it. We have the NCSC accelerator and a lot of our innovation space. That is great opportunity to bring this together with some of our partners, some great tech companies, and that's where magic will happen.
I think this is a fantastic region to become a cyber tech hub.
We're hugely committed to Cheltenham, Gloucestershire and the Southwest. Something like 8,000 employees in the region.
We've got to keep on scaling now. So at the moment we've got to keep up with demand, and that's really leading up to 2023 and launching the Innovation Centre of Cyber Central.
You've got this perfect quadruple helix of public sector, academia, big company, small company, and it's the fusion of those where we get the explosions.
You've got the potential of the great minds, bringing great minds together to collaborate and innovate and be pioneers. That's the place that we're trying to create.
I think this is our one-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Very rarely you get the opportunity to participate in something brand new.
The Cyber Central project brings together a synergy of homes, of jobs in a fantastic environment, and it's those ingredients that make the place a whole.
Cheltenham fundamentally is a fantastic place to live and work. We have world-class festivals, areas of outstanding beauty within the landscape, and we also have an absolutely fantastic schooling system.
You can't do it here where we have all this cybersecurity intellect. Where else can we do it? Certainly the large companies see that that intellect is worth coming here for.
So I hope you enjoyed that short video. It gives me goosebumps every time I watch that, goosebumps. Right, so what is special though about Cheltenham and our value proposition? Well, we thought we'd go through 5 different aspects that we think make us unique and special in the UK. The first one obviously is GCHQ. Home of GCHQ's National Cybersecurity Centre. It's been in the area for over 60 years. It is the focal point for cybersecurity. There's about 6,000 employees, plus an extensive commercial supply chain. And NCSC in particular, the cyber wing, have been leading innovation over the last few years with their accelerator programs. And NCSC also convened quite a lot of academic research in cybersecurity. So there's, it's a national organisation that happens to be locally based with an international reach.
Okay, and when we started digging into this more to understand, well, what is this ecosystem that sits around it, and how much activity is really going on in this sector. So we commissioned Hatch Regeneris to do a report for us, and we thought this was going to be reasonably impressive, but the reports, the results were pretty staggering when we got them back. It appears that Cheltenham and Gloucestershire have the largest concentration of businesses outside of London in the UK, and those densities 6 times as much for Gloucestershire and 11 times as much the norm in Cheltenham, which we thought, I don't think we ever believed it was going to be like that. So we did a little bit more work in terms of looking at these. Do you want to, sorry, you're right, yeah, sorry. Sorry, that one, yeah. And some of the numbers that sat around this regarding about the growth potential and what's happened over the last 5 years. So if you look at the top slide there, Cheltenham, in terms of the number of businesses that have grown and the growth in the 5-year period, we have quite a bit of modest growth there compared to other sectors, part of London or the rest of England. However, but when you actually look at the number of jobs, in terms of that growth over 5 years, it's gone up by 48%. So not only does that mean that there are lots of businesses growing in this area, but they are not just startups that disappear. These are businesses that are properly growing and getting properly established in the area. So this was one of the big sort of investment decisions that we looked at when we started unpicking what is going on inside there. We also looked at the economic benefit of actually delivering this scheme. So in terms of the number of houses, something in the region of just short of 4,000 homes there, and the economic benefit that would come out of this. And I suppose this is one of the things that we talk about, the commercial strategy and why we're doing this. Are we going to get a massive commercial return from this? Well, we'll go into that a little bit later, and that there are considerable risks associated with this. But it's the wider benefits that this brings as well. It's the business rates, the council tax, and just the general impact that this will have on these high quality jobs. The long-term interest in some of the younger people and some of the deprived communities there nearby.
So thinking about this sort of ecosystem that we keep talking about, we have some of the largest tech companies in the world on our doorstep, such as IBM and BAE Systems. We've also got some scale-up startups like Ripjar who've come out of the local area, and we've got Cheltenham festivals, which is just incredible. And we've got the largest cyber cluster in the UK, CEng, on our doorstep, and growing places like Hub 8, that is a co-working space specifically for cyber. So a great ecosystem. When we look at the third value proposition, we have quite an incredible academic network in the region, and that's not just world-class research in cybersecurity. This is about the talent pipeline. This is about skills, things like cyber apprentices, and so on. We've got the academic centres of excellence are accredited by NCSC, so they have to meet a particular level, and we've been doing pioneering work with schools in the area.
Okay, so the next level to this is why this is special. It's when we actually look at the site and step back, and you did see us fall out of the sky as part of this video. But when you look at it, we have two motorway junctions on either side of the site. There is an airport there, which services the site, which is probably less than a couple of 100 metres away from it, a main Malone railway station. And not only that, we've got investment in the Junction 10, which is at the top of the page, which was announced as part of the HIF regime coming forward, that we're going to get £220 million invested in that to turn it into a four-way junction and get a link road into the site. So what you have from that is it's a very well connected site. And also, one of the things that we didn't really appreciate before is just even from Cheltenham Station, which is less than a mile away, you can pretty much get to most of the UK cities and towns, most of them within 2 hours. So we are ultra connected, and I think sometimes Gloucestershire and some of the people listening to this might also suffer from this. Sometimes we're not very good at selling ourselves and understanding how well connected we actually might be, and we saw this as a real positive. The other thing which is hugely important is leadership. Any investors really looking to get behind something, what they really want to understand is where local authority and government are on this. And if you actually look at the things that are sitting behind this site, it is a reasonably impressive list. So the government are heavily invested into cyber, part of the spending review, and we'll see that as it unfolds. I know we're going through some tricky times at the moment with government funding, but they are committed to growth in this sector. £220 million from the HIF bid for Junction 10. Our council has invested just short of £40 million just buying the site, let alone the delivery of this. And we've also committed to almost £200 million in housing delivery, both affordable and private housing. Put together to that, between us and Tewkesbury councils, we've taken steps to take compulsory purchase powers if we need them. And the LEP have currently investing £22 million on some highways infrastructure. I just wanted to talk a little bit about housing and the importance of this, because obviously we talked around something just short of 4,000 homes to be delivered here. But what's really important is making those houses accessible. And I'll talk about affordable housing a little bit, but as you all know, a lot of people, affordable housing is not even accessible to a lot of people, particularly young people. So one of the concepts that we're really looking at is, if we really want to attract talent here, how do we provide homes, good quality homes, for young people who can't afford to buy them. And that's one of our challenges. So we're currently looking at a model that we'd be providing almost homes in multiple occupation, but to a reasonable and good standard, which are affordable for people. So we think if people get a good home, that's a real attractor to why they might want to come. Now we want to look at scale, and people think Cheltenham, can you really deliver this? But just as an example, in the top left corner there, the Golden Valley site, 200 hectares. And then we're just showing you some comparators. So the City of London, next to that in terms of size, the Olympic Village, and then Massachusetts Institute of Technology down there, and then the University of Manchester. So we do have quite a comparable scale to just imagine what's possible. So if we look at this as a part of a development plan, and how that goes. So there's our 200 hectare development. But the next step is potential. Can we grow? Can we extend this if it really does work out? And I think the answer is yes. So the next question is, well, where can we take this to?
So you might think, why is Gloucestershire and Cheltenham a place to do this? Well, Silicon Valley started as a garage in the 1930s, and you look at it, what it is now. To go from Cheltenham to Bristol is the same distance as San Francisco to San Jose. It's the same size. So it's an impressive growth over quite a few decades. Similarly in China, this is Shenzhen. So this was a fishing village in the 1950s, and now it's the hardware tech capital of the world. It's just like something out of Blade Runner. So I guess the question for us though is, what is the honeypot? How are we going to make the honey? So we've got a number of things here. We've got GCHQ, who've got a great history of innovation. We've got academia and research and development and incubation. There's a wide selection of businesses, small and large, and startups. We'll talk a bit about the honeypot, and skills and talent are actually right at the heart of this. And the agency is a working title for a visitor attraction. So firstly, we've got GCHQ innovators. So they are already in the local area. So we want them to be a core part of the campus. Then we bring along academia. And again, research and development is really fundamental. For researchers, getting access to small businesses to do their user research is really important. So that proximity really matters. And then bringing business, whether that's startups and small companies that are in the sector, or the large tech companies, and also all the professional services and the marketing companies and the accountants and the legal companies. So those three are the first three core components. I mentioned startups. That is different to small to medium enterprises. They have specific needs. They need investment, they need resources, and they need customers, and they want to grow. And we want them to grow in our local area. And so bringing those together, we on the campus, we want to have an innovation center, a zone that will help that knowledge exchange to happen. But it can't just be a business, it's got to be social, and it's got to have a life to it. So we want to have cafes and restaurants. And as I mentioned, the agency, this is something that will be unique in the country, that will be an all year round destination that people will come to. And it's not just about history, it's about the future. So these are all underpinned by getting the right skills and talent. And when we look at the cyber industry, there's just not enough people in the country getting into this sector. And this is not just about inspiring skill kids, which is fundamental. This is also about looking at organizations and companies and people that maybe need to retrain. And there are organizations doing that. And we want to really partner with those so that we can get people into the industry. I mentioned the primes, these are the large tech companies and defense companies, but also the small, there are niche companies in the sector that are really providing a valuable service.
Okay, so part of this is also looking not into the green fields, but looking back behind us as to sort of say, well, how can we actually benefit the existing communities? So picture there of Madeline Howard, who's a director of CEng, one of the organisations that works with NCSC, and she leads an initiative that works with schools to try and get more of the schools, particularly girls, involved in this sector. I think Gloucestershire is actually leading the way on this initiative, and it's having a huge impact. Now, this is something that we really want to roll out to make sure that this isn't just us attracting businesses who are going to be relocating to Cheltenham. This is something that we really want to make that has got some long-term impact and has the ability to regenerate our existing communities. So in terms of the timeline, what's happened so far? So just to say the speed that we're going, so 2015 was the announcement, and since then we've got this land adopted in the strategic plan. There's transport infrastructure awards, garden community announced. We purchased the land back in 2019, and then we go all the way through to the HIF announcement back in March. Looking forward, so where do we go now? So we did our launch in April 2020, and as we're working through there, we've got the comprehensive spending review, and then looking forward into, we'll hopefully have a development partner on board early 2021, and then we can really start making things happen. So that hopefully we'll be able to see some of these things operational on site 23, 24. So really just to sort of give you a quick how that timeline builds out as part of a development. So we'll just sort of spin through. Here's the things on the ground which are actually there at the moment that Reid's been talking about. So GCHQ, NCSC, innovation, all those things are taking place, but they're not actually all in one place on the ground. We've got Hub 8 that we mentioned. This is part of the ecosystem building in Cheltenham at the moment, but we're getting so much interest in this at the moment. We've decided to invest with some meanwhile uses, so we're trying to get things going on the ground. So in the centre of Cheltenham, which I'm just going to show you some slides of at the moment, is how we scale this up in the meantime whilst the bigger development starts coming forward. So after 23, 24, we hope to see Cluster 1, which is the innovation centre being built out, and then hopefully our JV partner will help us create this into a world-class development. And through we go to 2025, when hopefully the scheme will really be taking shape. This is just an idea of one of the things that we got some money from the Get Building Better Fund. So we've got £3.1 million in a part of town which is an old rundown car park, so replacing people with cars. We're going to invest as some of the businesses that are being attracted to Cheltenham at the moment around this sector to help us scale up for when the big development comes on. So what we've got this thing which we were looking called Coda, really bringing some of those businesses from the sector together to help them to co-work and start the concept of the Innovation Centre in Cheltenham. This should be ready on the ground by 2021. So I suppose as we come to the summary about this, why did the council spend £3.7 million on a green field? And I have a picture there of Arnold Palmer, because I suppose based on the presentation that we've just done, one could say well, you're quite lucky really. You've got GCHQ, you've got all these businesses sitting around you. It's quite straightforward. But what we could have done is step back and let the developer bring this forward and hope that they got it right. We could have just taken people's word for it that those businesses were there, but we didn't. So I'm very proud to work for a council that when we took this to our councillors to vote for it, they unanimously supported our decision to buy this land, at considerable risk. And the pushback that we got from our members was very much the risk of not doing this is actually far greater because this opportunity is so great. And as it unfolds and we listen to the narrative from the government and where they want to be, they do want to be a post-Brexit scientific superpower. They want to be global leaders in this sector, and this opportunity is ours to take advantage of. And I know it's very challenging times, but this is really the way we feel that we can drive our commercial strategy. Just to sort of leave you with it, we were going to have a VIP event, a top secret event based around this industry. Obviously, events like this at the moment are having to take place virtually. So we wait, hopefully in the future, and maybe invite some of the attendees of this conference to come along and see what we're doing sometime in the future. Okay, so thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Jonathan.
Tim and Reid, thank you so much for that. Cheltenham is one of the organisations that we get asked about by a lot of people that we work with. A lot of people are very interested in what you guys are doing, and all eyes on you at the moment. So best of luck with that, and thank you so much for talking to us about that. We do have a number of questions that have come in via the Q&A function, so I'll put some of those to you in a second. I wonder if I can just pick up where you left off on the point about engagement with members. So you touched on this, you talked about members at Cheltenham being really conscious of the risk of not doing this. Now, a lot of people on our call will work for political organisations. We've got a lot of people from local government on the webinar today, and they will be thinking, we have taken ideas to members before for commercial opportunities, property investments, areas where we could increase our existing levels of income, or areas where we could generate new income. And a lot of those ideas have been rejected. So it's been back to the drawing board to make savings through more traditional ways. And I guess the way that you respond to those challenges will be different depending on the exact political makeup of your organisation. But I wonder if you got any more tips for people about how you bring members on that commercial journey with you?
So I suppose it goes back to most local authorities, and without generalising, we all have something which is slightly unique to us, and a lot of the time it's that idea about making something of that and turning it into a way that you think lands well with the members. And all local authorities will have a different group of members and how they work together. But we found that if you're committed enough and there is that unique element that you can get behind, there is usually something which has commercial legs to it, and then you start digging into it. And the more you dig into it, usually you do actually find that people will get behind you, particularly the local authority wants to drive something forward, comes up with a tangible, good quality strategy and is prepared to see it through. And I think that has grown, because I think initially when we looked at this, we were honestly thinking, right, is this growth really here? Is this sector really expanding? And the more that you dig into it and the more you get behind it, I think we've actually created part of that growth, because everyone's now looking over the wall at us. So we've got the likes of Microsoft, other big names, jaw-dropping names, actually, wanting to come to us to say, we want to invest in you. Now, sometimes it doesn't have to be something which is so grandiose there, but if you've got that commitment and you get people behind you, I think it's very possible.
So I must chastise myself. Someone's made a very legitimate comment in the chat, which is that some of the people on our webinar today may well be members. And some of those members may be thinking, do you know what, it's so frustrating that I can't get officers to think and act in a more commercially minded way. So out of balance, I'll just put some of those views across. We have had another question come in via the Q&A, which is, to what extent will the Golden Valley support a circular economy or community wealth building? And do you have any examples of how you anticipate that might happen?
Well, yes. So one of the slides that I actually took out of this presentation was this idea about the sort of the people who helped us with the video, actually, a concept that we're talking about the giving share. And it's actually about, we're looking to bring people with us who want to invest in the future, who want to invest in young people, and also want to invest, in social value. And that, that's probably ticks a lot of boxes. And if we are able to strive and deliver even half of what that ambition is, it's really important that we're bringing the right people with us and the right investors with us. And our ambition is very much to have something that maybe gives something back, but it invests something into communities. And we are, in a way, it's quite interesting. When you look at the photograph, you've got GCHQ literally 100 yards away from the site. Next to that, there's a school called PETS Academy, which is one of the best grammar schools in the region.
In the country.
Yeah, in the country. And it's amazing, but literally on the other side of that fence, you've probably got some of the highest levels of deprivation and challenge in Gloucestershire. So it is, there's these real sort of extremes. And us not being able to, to use this as a means to regenerate and invest, and also bring people to invest who have a view that they want to help with something more than just making money, is one of our objectives. But as I say, there's a lot of them: carbon neutrality, affordable housing. You link them all, smart infrastructure. the cost is considerable, and I suppose that's the balance we've got to make about how much financial return are we seeking to make out of this, or how much of a longer term view have we got to take. So it's a great challenge, and it's something I would say we'll hope we will deliver on, but the jury's out.
This is an initiative that the council's invested significant amounts of money in, but this is not a council-only initiative. This has got a wide range of partner organisations involved in it. With collaboration can often come compromise, as a lot of people on our webinar will be able to relate to. How have you found the partnership working to date, and how have you managed to maintain the pace of what you're trying to achieve in quite a complex partnership environment?
Well, I'd say it is a partnership, and we need to bring a lot of people with us. So one of the important things down the middle of the site is the boundary between Tewkesbury and Cheltenham. None of this would be feasible without Tewkesbury Borough Council. From a planning point of view, from a support point of view, the garden community that we're part of is us and Tewkesbury. And although the first elements of this are very much Cheltenham, it wouldn't be possible without that deeper partnership. And then we weave into that the county council. But the people taking the financial risk at the moment is very much Cheltenham. So in that respect, I think it's all eyes on us at the moment, and I think until it gets further down the road, and I think other people then start putting more money into this, and I think this is the situation now with the county council, because delivering some of the big infrastructure schemes, they are now holding the baby as well. So that's when everyone starts needing to work together, and there's partners who have to work with 3-4 different authorities. You're all different sovereign bodies, and it is challenging. It is really challenging, but at the moment we're still managing to drive it forward. And I think the media attention that we're getting is in a way helping that. Although I kind of say that with trepidation, because obviously the bigger the project becomes, the higher the fall is when possibly things go wrong. So I think everyone would agree it is hard work, and I think the further down the road we get, the more resource we have to put to keep it going.
Great. Tim and Reid, thank you so much. I can see from the engagement on the chat panel how interested people have been in this, how much people have enjoyed listening to the work you've done so far, and how much everyone's looking forward to seeing where this gets you to. Thank you so much for being part of our webinar session today. And you mentioned that you'll be running other sessions, perhaps not face-to-face, but maybe virtually, that some of our attendees today might be interested in. So very happy to be a conduit for those details, because I'm sure people will be interested in learning more.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys. So we are almost at time. We have about a minute left. That wraps up the first of our sessions. I hope people enjoyed that today. I hope you found it useful, insightful, practical, and I really do hope that people will join us for the next session. So the next one we are running is next week, Tuesday, the 13th of October. That's at 3 p.m. I'll be joined by Amardeep and Louis from Trowers and Hamlins, who will be talking about commercialism 2.0, and Andrew Grant, Interim Chief Executive of Cambridge City Council, will be talking about his experience of putting a commercial strategy into action. Thank you so much, everyone, for giving up an hour and a half of your time today. Great to see so many of you on the call in these unusual times, still making the time to debate and engage with important issues like this. Hope to see you soon, and I wish you all the very best.